Welcome everyone to our church this evening. This is the first evening of a series that we're doing about Bible prophecy. And what we want to try to demonstrate is how powerful Bible prophecy really is, and what in fact it really is, so that when we look at the things that are going on in the world, one of the first things we can do is to realize that they are written beforehand in the Bible. And they're not written in an obscure sort of way. They're very precise and very detailed, and they're very systematic. And so what we want to do over the next 6 to 8 months, first Thursday evening in every month, is to have a look at Bible prophecy and to try to do it in the most simple way that we possibly can. That's why you've got me. The more complicated stuff is why you've got Dave.
Welcome everyone. One of the main reasons why we put this series together is that we believe we are living in very interesting times indeed, and in particularly the last 10 years. So to introduce the series, we're just going to have a look back over the last 10 years and see what's been happening in the world. The first being probably the most dramatic event of the last 10 years, which is, if my computer will work, here we go, 9/11. Norm, can we have the lights off? Just helps the pictures, please. Okay. So, 9/11, very much in our memories at the moment because we've recently had the 10-year anniversary, but metaphorically, the world shifted on its axis. Looking back now, 10 years on, we can see how it's changed national policies, global security, political agendas. It changed the way we, or passengers, travel on planes, to the extent where nations fight wars. This was definitely a game changer. There was a new threat to the world, a new threat to global security, and that, of course, was terrorism. Terrorism no longer was limited to isolated pockets around the world. Terrorism had entered a new phase, a new era, a dark arena. Terrorism had shifted into the realm of global mass destruction, and it could just strike anywhere. And this sent shockwaves across the world. Fear of terrorists exploiting weapons of mass destruction really gripped the world. This was a real wake-up point that if the wrong weapons got into the wrong hands, mass murder could be carried out. So this galvanized nations, galvanized politicians to do something about it. So in response to 9/11, we had Afghanistan, 2001. The armed forces of the United States, the UK, and the Afghan army launched Operation Enduring Freedom, invading Afghanistan with the goal of dismounting Al-Qaeda terrorist organization and defeating the Taliban. As we know, that battle continues till today, with many people asking, what have we really achieved? Are we liberating a country, or are we fueling more hatred? 2003 came the Iraq War. Very familiar photo here. A controversial war to root out weapons of mass destruction and remove a brutal, corrupt dictator. Shock and awe, remember that phrase? This was to show the whole world that America was a powerful opponent to pick a fight with. Eventually, the regime was toppled, but no weapons of mass destruction were found. March 2004, one morning in Spain. The Madrid train bombings consisted of a series of coordinated bombing attacks on the Madrid train system. A bit closer to home. London, 2005, 7th of July, or 7/7 as it's often referred to. Series of coordinated suicide attacks this time. here in the United Kingdom. This is where we had people deliberately targeting civilians using London's public transport during the rush hour. So terrorism was quite clearly a global problem, and similar terrorist events have happened all over the world. It's now a global problem, and the old-fashioned ways of fighting terrorism was proving ineffective in dealing with radical, militant, religious extremists. So this was a game changer, and on a new stage, the global stage. Another shift in trend in the last 10 years. 2008 brought us the credit crunch. World economies fueled on debt, greed and corrupt lending cracked, sending a financial earthquake across the globe. Banks collapsed, markets dived, jobs were lost. Economies in the USA and Europe are struggling to recover, and as we all know, we're remaining on the teetering edge of a global financial meltdown. Again, the catalyst may have been an overzealous lending in the American subprime housing market, but the financial rot is everywhere, isn't it? Economies built on debt. But again, similar to terrorism, rather than this being contained in certain countries or nations like it was in the 30s, world economies have become so interconnected, so integrated, that some economists are now saying that we need a new world system, a new economic system to provide global financial regulation. Whilst Western economies are pretty much in tatters at the moment, China and other East Asian economies have boomed over the last 10 years in particular. In fact, it's been mainly China that has been lending to Western countries to enable them to buy China's goods. So even though China is doing very well, China has a great interest in preventing large economies like America and ours from failing, because we buy their goods. Also, because China and other Eastern nations have been doing so well, lifting more and more of their population out of poverty into prosperity, these growing numbers of that population are wanting the same things as us. They want the lifestyles that we have, the same jobs, the same cars, the same homes, the same foods. This in turn is putting pressure on world resources, food in particular, but also raw materials, energy, oil. Demand has increased, so have the prices, and this is cascaded because our world is so integrated now. This is cascaded across global markets to reach you and me, so that when we go and fill up our cars or do the weekly shop, we gasp at the rising prices. Over the last 10 years, we've also witnessed some phenomenal natural disasters in the recent years. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, and now droughts in the Horn of Africa again. Now, some might say that we've always had those, but we're told by experts that natural disasters and trends are also increasing. Historical records prove to us that the world is currently experiencing an escalation in natural disasters. Is this a natural cycle, or is it something else? These natural disasters, which are destroying crops, and the increase in human population, and it's expected this month to go through the 7 billion barrier, predicted 2050, 9 billion population of the world. These increases are putting extreme pressures on food prices. 10 to 20 pounds extra on our weekly food bill is probably inconvenient for most in this country, but for many areas of the world, it can mean malnutrition or starvation. So those are some global trends that have been happening in the last 10 years, shifting balances. And when society feels under pressure, cracks unexpectedly start to appear, don't they? A good example of that is recently, the London riots. The London riots caught everyone by surprise. Most of our nation, including myself, watched in disbelief as we witnessed parts of London being turned into a war zone. We're told that even people with respectable jobs became caught up in the looting frenzy. The sheer scale of destruction overwhelmed the emergency services, with some saying that it was scenes reminiscent of London during the war. After the riots, of course, came the questions. Why? Why did this happen? And more frighteningly, how could it happen so quickly with apparently no warning? And it was so open, no shame or guilt. Was it high unemployment? Was it family breakdown? Little or no prospects? Boredom? Or perhaps just a protest against the financial system that had almost bankrupted our society? On top of what I've shown so far, we've had a monumental shift of a different kind. Global communications. Global communications have increased on a gigantic scale. Just go back 10 years, the year 2000. Who had the internet in their home? Please raise your hand. I never had it. It's my wife putting her hand up. Okay. And if you did have it, it was probably at dial-up speed, which is painful when you think about it now. Who has broadband in their home? Pretty much most of the room. High-speed internet in their home. Astounding. And you can also have the internet in your pocket. Who's got a smartphone or an iPhone? Quite a few people. A few hands going up. Now I'm told in this smartphone there's more computer power in here than all the computers for the Apollo missions that went into space. That's how gigantic the move is in the direction of global communications. Commerce, as ever, is the main driver for this colossal networking of our planet, so that now an internet idea could be turned into a billion-dollar business just within a few years. Facebook is probably one of the most famous networking sites about connecting people. And it currently has more than 800 million active users. Twitter has about 100 million users, but it is growing rapidly. This social network phenomenon has had an effect that nobody predicted. Nobody predicted. It has literally turned an area of our planet, a region of our planet, upside down. The Arab Spring. This began in Tunisia, spread to Egypt, and then spread across the Middle East. Facebook and other social networking sites enabled suppressed Arab populations to circumnavigate the authorities, enabled them to have a collective voice, enabled them to unite one another. They could organise protests and record on their phones the brutal crackdown of their authorities and then put them up on the internet. By doing that, that stopped regimes from massacring their own people behind closed doors. No longer could they do it behind closed doors. The more the dictators tried to suppress the uprising, the more exposure they got on the world internet stage. This in turn fueled the uprising, and eventually regimes were toppled over by their own people. Some say what the democratic nations, the Western nations, have been trying to initiate for decades in this area, Facebook and other social networks achieved in weeks. Will the Arab Spring lead to democracy flourishing in the Middle East? Will stability and security finally be established in this volatile area? Well, for true peace and security, there is an age-old problem in the Middle East that has to be resolved. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Until this conflict is resolved between the Arab and the Jew, peace and security will never exist in this very volatile area. Many world leaders have attempted to bring these two nations together, but they failed, like many before. Ironically, the Middle East is just as connected with world economies, world terrorism, global stability, so that if the Arab Spring that we've witnessed this year was to default and a Middle East war erupt, then the whole world would suffer. This is where Bible prophecy gets really interesting. We want to show you how the Bible accurately predicts events in this region, the Middle East. It's done it in the past, and it will do it again in the future. And this region, the Middle East, is key to the future, not of just that area, but the whole world. Peace and security will come to the Middle East, even the whole world. But certain events, according to the Bible, must take place first. Chris.